The scoreboard behind us doesn't change. Each week here at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, it's always beat and then whatever logo of the team Ohio State is playing. Jeremy Birmingham from LettermanRoad.com joins us now. And Berm, I think this week, though, there truly is more with that W logo.
Yeah, and I don't think it's even that tarnished with Wisconsin's loss to Illinois, to be honest. I think that the guys in this building understand what they're up against this week, and they realize that this truly is going to be the first test of the 2019 season. We've said it over and over every week. Is this the week it's a test? This week is going to be a test. Wisconsin is one of 2 or 3 teams in the Big Ten that can physically play with Ohio State as far as just the size and strength, and that in itself is enough to get your attention. And the Buckeyes certainly, in their Tuesday press conferences, were all very on point and on task when it came to the Badgers.
Let's talk a little about that Wisconsin loss at Illinois. You could describe that as a fluke loss. Statistically, Wisconsin dominated that game. In fact, Illinois did not have a single snap inside the red zone, but Illinois won that game because they scored more points than Wisconsin. So you could throw it off as a fluke, but there were some things in that game that really make me think Ohio State perhaps is going to cruise against Wisconsin, particularly the way Illinois dominated the line of scrimmage both offensively and defensively.
You know, I thought Wisconsin was doing what Ohio State did on Friday, which was go as basic as you can, don't allow yourself to show too much, and don't put too much on film, right? But then you saw Wisconsin doing weird stuff. Like, I mean, they're up by 8 points with 6 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and we're throwing the football when you have the country's preeminent running back on your roster, and then he fumbles, and then all of a sudden, it's one of those perfect storms of when you're like, oh, I can't believe we're even in a game here, and then it starts to get in your head. Jack Cohn throws an interception with 2 minutes to go in the game. You're like, why are you throwing the ball?
Right.
Like, that's not something that Wisconsin would do normally. And I don't know if they were just in their own head or if they're trying to do too much or too little. I don't follow their team that closely, but I was watching that game and thinking this just does not look like what I've seen out of Wisconsin. It's not the same Wisconsin team that beat the snot out of Michigan a few weeks ago. And, I think that you don't ever want to say a loss is good for a team, but I certainly think that Wisconsin will be a little bit more dialed in and a little bit focused, more so than they would be otherwise. But I agree that the Buckeyes should win this game, and the 14-point line in Vegas is pretty big, I guess, for 2 top 15 teams, but the Buckeyes are that much better than them right now.
You touched on one of the 2 reasons why Illinois won that game was the turnovers. The other thing was Illinois had a lot of chunk plays. And this is an Ohio State offense that has feasted on chunk plays all season long.
Yeah, that's sort of the Buckeyes' bread and butter. They have more runs of more than 20 yards than the rest of the Big Ten East does combined. It's a program that Justin Fields has more touchdowns than Michigan does this year. So obviously the Buckeyes are able to put up points and do it quickly. They lead the country in scoring margin. They lead the country in second quarter scoring. It's a team that obviously is playing very well offensively. But if you don't control the line of scrimmage, and we saw when the Buckeyes hosted Michigan State 3 weeks ago, there's an opportunity for that team to be physically challenged. And Michigan State did it, and Wisconsin is going to be bigger and stronger than Spartans were. And I think that that's really where this game is made or broken for the Buckeyes, and I think it will happen early if the Buckeyes can dominate and control that line of scrimmage the way that Illinois did, which, again, so much of that is about want to, and it's about motivation. I just don't think that you walk into that game at 11 o'clock in the morning and you're ready to go. And I think that obviously when you walk into Ohio Stadium, it's a whole different vibe than walking into Memorial Stadium in Champaign.
And the way Illinois dominated in the fourth quarter leads credence to the theory that, Wisconsin hadn't been tested. They hadn't played a 4-quarter game. But you can make that same argument about Ohio State going into this game with Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the challenge, right? If this game on Saturday is tight in the fourth quarter, are the Buckeyes ready for that sort of thing? And there's just no way to know if that's the case or not. They haven't been in that game. Every game has been over by the start of the third quarter, essentially. And I think that what you're looking for out of Ohio State is just the maintained energy, the maintained focus on staying on task, because talent-wise, they're better, okay? The execution-wise, who knows? I mean, you know what Wisconsin is. You know what they're going to do. They're not a team that's going to try to change up who they are for this game. And I think that ultimately it just comes down to Ohio State saying, we are better than you, and going out there and putting it on display from first snap to final whistle.
We have seen this Wisconsin team many times over the last 20 years, really. You've got a big running back. Jonathan Taylor's also a very fast running back as well, but a very good running back, a huge offensive line, and a quarterback that can do just enough to make you have to keep you honest, and some receivers that are going to surprise you. So this is a Wisconsin team, with the exception of the 2014 Big Ten title game, this is a Wisconsin program that has always played Ohio State tough.
Yeah, and what it is right now is an offensive line for Wisconsin that will decide how this game goes, I think, on Saturday. The Buckeyes' defensive line is one of the best in the country, but they have not played a unit like Wisconsin's front five will, put them in a position where they're going to have to win that game. Chase Young has been as dominant as any player in the country, but he's not played against tackles like this. And I think that what you see out of Wisconsin is what you get. But I also know that Ohio State, traditionally, when they've been faced with these sort of challenges by a marquee running back, has usually done pretty well. They are a good run-stopping team. They're averaging less than 3 yards a carry against them this season. And I think if Wisconsin's going to beat the Buckeyes, it's going to be Jack Cohn and those receivers who are better than you think, really having to make the plays. Because I don't think this is going to be a game that Jonathan Taylor beats the Buckeyes.
On paper, Chase Young, perhaps a quiet game against Northwestern, did have 1 sack, but certainly the Wildcats were scheming against Chase Young. But I think the important thing we've seen out of Chase Young is his leadership on the field, off the field, and the way this team has kind of mirrored Chase Young's attitude. It's a very infectious attitude. It is very much an attitude of having fun while also dominating, which is what we've seen Chase Young do, which is what we've seen Ohio State do.
Yeah, the Buckeyes are focused. I mean, Chase Young has said it over and over in the last year. They're not going to let Purdue and Iowa happen again. And that is, it sounds simple to say that, but the reality is it's human nature to sort of let your guard down when you know you're playing against somebody that's not as good as you. And the Buckeyes have done, I think, a little bit of what Clemson's done in the last couple of years, which is Clemson on their schedule wall in their facility doesn't say anybody's name but Clemson. So week 1 is Clemson, week 10 is Clemson. They're playing against themselves. They're playing against the standard of what it should be in that program. And Ohio State obviously is one of the most talented and tradition-rich programs in college football history. And I think what Chase Young has done, a guy who's a surefire top 2 or 3 pick in the NFL draft next year when he declares his early his plans to leave early. But his ability to turn the focus inward and to focus on this season, not getting ahead of himself, not thinking about all the money he's going to be making next April and May, but he has been absolutely the physical leader on this defense, but also emerging into the role of the vocal leader, which everyone sort of assumed that'd be Jonathan Cooper, but when Coop missed the first 5 games of the year, somebody else had to fill that vacuum, and Chase Young's done it very well.
What Chase Young's impact reminds me a little bit of what Deion Sanders did when he went to the San Francisco 49ers. Niners were very corporate, very by the business, and then Deion goes there for that 1 year. Jerry Rice loosens up, and all of a sudden you have this fun-loving Niners team that won a Super Bowl. The other game that a lot of Ohio State fans were paying attention to on Saturday was the Penn State-Michigan game. Penn State winning that game 28-21. Although I don't know if Penn State won that game, Michigan lost that game. I don't know really what to take out of that game because we were 1 drop pass away from James Franklin once again blowing a 2-score fourth-quarter lead.
And I feel confident that Michigan would have won that game in overtime the way that everything was trending. But as you said, I don't know that I left watching that game thinking that either team really had done anything great. There were some very strange decisions on both sides. Jim Harbaugh kicking a 58-yard field goal for some reason.
Attempting a 58-yarder.
I mean, there's things that I just don't really understand. Obviously, I thought that Shea Patterson played his best game that I've seen him play as a Michigan quarterback once the second half started. And, you saw why Big Game James has that ironic nickname, because he tightened up so much after they went up 21-0. And almost allowed Michigan and Jim Harbaugh to get their way back into the game. And I don't know that you leave that one thinking that either team really asserted themselves or proved why they should be considered a top contender. But Penn State's undefeated. They're probably going to be undefeated when they walk into Ohio Stadium on November 23rd. And that game will be for all the proverbial marbles.
Yeah, we'll talk a lot more about Sean Clifford and KJ Hamler in about a month from now. Ohio State defense ranked number 2 in the nation, just about every statistical category, usually trailing Wisconsin. Where is this game going to be won or lost on Saturday?
I mean, it's cliche, but I think it's won in the trenches. It's won on the Ohio State offensive line versus the Badgers pass rush. Wisconsin's defensive line isn't as good as Ohio State's, but they do a very good job of blitzing with the linebackers and getting pressure from other players on the field. Jim Leonard, their defensive coordinator, is a very smart defensive coach. And then the Ohio State defensive line, how can they impact the game? How will they control Jonathan Taylor early? And how do the Buckeyes get a lead? Because if Wisconsin is forced to play from 10 or 14 points down, They're a totally different team, and I think that's really the goal for Ohio State is a fast start. Ryan Day joked about it in the press conference today that, they're very high standards around here. The Buckeyes scored within 4 minutes on Friday, and people thought they had a slow start. But they have to come out of the gate fast, and it can't be like Michigan State, that plodding around in the first quarter. They need to come out and assert their dominance early.
Yeah, you talk about the high standards at Ohio State. Ryan Day has begun his career 10-0 as a head coach. If he wins on Saturday against Wisconsin, he'll be 11-0, which will tie Earl Bruce for the third longest winning streak to start a head coaching career. That tells you about the standards at Ohio State. Jeremy Birmingham from LettermanRow.com. Thank you for joining us. Before we go, though, I do want you to talk about, we talked last week about Ryan Watts, the cornerback that Ohio State flipped. You had a chance to talk to him this last week in your latest episode of Vermology.
Yeah, Ryan Watts, he's a guy that they just really love the length. He's 6'3", 190 pounds. And as I talked to Ryan, it was really more about understanding that he had a choice between two of the country's 4 or 5 best programs. And if you look for some sort of confirmation, I guess, about how impactful Jeff Hafley has been for the Ohio State defense, you see it in the statistics. But as a recruiter, what Jeff Hafley's been able to do by taking his NFL experience, working with guys like Darrell Rivas and Richard Sherman over the years, and taking that to recruits, and not just saying, I worked with these guys, but showing film of exactly how he helped them and what he's done to change their career paths. And then you take a guy like Watts, 6'3", stack him up against Sherman, 6'3", and you see the body type similar, and you say, this is you. And it's unbelievable what Jeff Hafley's been able to do for Ohio State. After Kerry Coombs left after the 2017 season, there was a sort of question mark about what's going to happen with the defensive back recruiting. 2018 was a down year for the Ohio State defense, but also on the recruiting trail, and Jeff Hafley has resurrected that.
All right, thank you very much, Jeremy Birmingham from LettermanRow.com.